Standing in front of the spot where New York's World Trade Center once stood evokes memories of September 11, 2001. Thousands of lives lost, countless others changed and altered forever. As construction workers poured their heart and soul into the reconstruction of an American monument, questions still linger about who are Muslims? What do they believe? Perhaps more intriguing, is Islam really a religion of peace? But here in the United States, there exists a community of approximately 2 million African American Muslims, and they have their own unique journey to Islam. And this is their story.
Well, I'm here to tell you this afternoon that you better wonder not what will happen to the Nation of Islam, but you better start wondering what will happen to you if you don't become a member of the Nation of Islam.
Chicago, February 26, 1975. While the body of its leader lay waiting for burial, the Nation of Islam held its annual Savior's Day convention. The armory overflowed with those whose life had been touched by his message. For 43 straight years, Elijah Muhammad had been the leader of a movement that demanded a race of people reclaim their lost identity, and did so by employing a strategy that shook America into facing the residue of its painful past.
He said that we had to learn the knowledge of self, and that is the greatest thing that can happen to us, is that we have to reacquire the knowledge of self.
The rest of the Muslim world had looked at Elijah Muhammad as a false prophet and the Nation of Islam as a cult. It might have been some of those things when you define those things, but at the same time, it was an operation taking place on a people who needed some severe transitioning.
A movement that gave rise to some of the world's most courageous personalities.
This is the end of the trail for the fighting, for everything. I'm ready to give it all up for Allah, God, and my religion, Islam, and my leading teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I'm ready to die right now.
And others who challenged our logic and intellect.
No, we don't believe in segregation. We believe in separation. A society in which we can stand on our own feet and take care of ourselves as other intelligent people do.
In the building of a nation is the building of character. And that lies upon the building of minds.
It required a discipline in African American men, defying the stereotypes and cliches of their troubled past.
Don Elijah Muhammad's program took people who were ex-convicts, who were thieves, who were robbers, who were liars, who were pimps, who were players, and turned them into responsible human beings. Gave us a whole new culture.
In an outpour of emotions, speakers took to the podium to express love for their late leader and an undying loyalty for the one to follow.
His life was the will of God.
mission was the will of God. His passing is the will of God. His son is the will of God. And we are the will of God this afternoon. All praise is due to
But lurking in the undercurrent of the nation was the unfolding of a much different story. And on that February day, Elijah Muhammad's seventh child, Wallace, would carry the ideas of profound change.
The Imam actually freed our community.
Wallace came in with a completely different agenda and program.
Historically, I knew, after talking to him and seeing who he was, how he was able to transform Islam from being a bit of a reaction in the movement as I understood it, to a positive spiritual choice.
All things balanced and in a good world, sociologists and others, they would be studying what he did.
And it was like, whoa, what is this? And lo and behold, that was the religion of Islam.
He was able to show me how this was something that stood on its own as a great religious tradition, and that it was that which was at the heart of what he was doing with his own people, and therefore a new chapter in the history of religious dialogue.
We have plans to contribute to the cultural life of America, to the business life of America, and certainly to the religious life of America.
How he took the members from where we were and brought them to where we are.
An uncompromising movement led by an uncompromising man, refusing to retreat in a quest for independence through absolute separation. A son in exile for his unwillingness to concede to his father's ideas, and who sought to bring a one-separatist movement into the heart of the American mainstream, and a government priming itself for a perceived threat to its national security. An American story of a people struggling for purpose and identity, reclaiming a lost dignity, and marching on the shoulders of a man whom they called the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. This is Lost Found, the African American's journey to Al-Islam.
Who are you? You don't know. Don't tell me Negro, that's nothing. What were you before the white man named you a Negro?
African-American man had lost his identity.
We did have some identity problems.
No, what was your name? Yes, sir. And why don't you now know what your name was then?
Here you have a people who were treated like they were animals.
You've been beat down, you're inferior people.
Where is your history? How did the man wipe out your history?
During the 200 years of physical slavery, he lost all these things. He lost his language.
What tongue did you speak? How did the man take your tongue?
They weren't allowed to go to school.
We did not know what purpose that we were created.
He lost his values.
Taught that they were inferior by nature.
The African American was taught to hate himself.
What did the man do to make you as dumb as you are right now?
At the dawn of the 20th century, Black Americans migrated north from the southern states, seeking inclusion and searching for an identity. Having long been straddled with the burden of their blackness, the unforgiving rush northward brought the realization that they were hopelessly running from themselves.
I was born in 1914 in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm 94 years old. Had a farm about 45 miles from Birmingham. I knew nothing of race or anything there because it was out in the country until I came to Chicago. I think it was 1921. Chicago was extremely segregated.
At the close of slavery, blacks had long been accustomed to living within two distinct worlds, the ingenious design of Jim Crow, and the emotional destruction it would cause, went far beyond the boundaries of separation and etched itself within the hearts and minds of the segregated class.
If you want to render something inferior, you kill in your own mind its value and importance. In your mind, its value and importance. And then it becomes something that you can kick, that you can throw away, that you can misuse, that you can abuse anytime.
I mean, we all came out of the same pot. We all came out of the same pot of self-hate, lack of pride, lack of self-esteem, all of us, you know. And it wasn't just one or two of us, it was 22 million of us in that condition over the history of slavery.
The white people would give the best jobs and the best everything to those of lighter skin. People with straighter hair and all that stuff, they got the best jobs.
As your skin gets lighter, your future gets brighter. They were advertising Natanola bleaching cream. This was done way back in the 30s and in the 20s. And that's how the society was working at that time.
I can't run and hide, 'cause I'm dying inside. And I really wanna be free, but I don't like being me. And all like a child with a toy, my pain brings them joy. So when will it be that I'm a man and not a boy? But oh, somebody tell me why. Sometimes when I'm all alone, I fall on my knees. Why do I feel this way?
In the fall of 1897, Elijah Poole was the seventh child born to Willie and Marie Poole. The Reverend Willie Poole, as he was called, enjoyed a reputation of being a charismatic preacher who was in high demand within black churches.
My great-grandmother told us when my daddy was young, he used to go and sit on his daddy's lap on the pulpit platform until my daddy get up to go preach. He told my grandmother, my great-grandmother, his grandmother, he said, one day I'm going to be a preacher. Now this is a kid talking to his grandmother. He said, one day I'm going to be a preacher, but I'm not going to preach like my father preached. I'm not going to preach what he preaches.
Elijah met Clara Bell Evans, and the two would eventually marry and move their young family to Detroit, Michigan.
My daddy got a good job working at Ford General Motors. And he worked there until Depression, 1929. Now, we wasn't the only one in condition. Even Caucasian, they stood in bread lines just like we did.
The hardships of the Depression and a seemingly endless road to unemployment caused Elijah to drink heavily, and the children, including Clara, were reduced to living with the daily pains of hunger.
I remember actually going myself to a garbage can and take a piece of cake out of the garbage can to eat. I did it at the age of 4 years old. That's how bad things were. And my mother, it hurted her to see her children without food. Now, knowing the condition of our family, and knowing that my mother at that time had planned on killing herself and her children because she didn't want to live like that. She was going to just kill her children and herself because she didn't want to live that way. She had 6 children, husband without a job. She was carrying a 7th child, pregnant at that time, with my brother Elijah too. And nothing to eat. I remember the welfare lady came by, and my sister, Raya, we called her Lottie at that time, was so hungry, she was crying.
On July 4th, 1930, a man with a skin complexion of the privileged class walked the streets of Detroit. Armed with an array of colorful exotic silks for sale, he caught the attention of the people. But more exotic than the silks he carried was the message he came to deliver.
Here's a white-looking man telling you that black is all right.
He looked like a white man. He was very beautiful, handsome man.
He told us in effect that we were actually more than what we were, to try to balance off us being nothing.
That following week, Clara sat and listened as this unknown silk peddler stimulated her conscience.
Luthersville asked my mother, would she go with her to listen to his lecture the next time she go. My mother agreed.
He said his name was Farrakhan Muhammad, and that he had come to rescue the lost tribe of Shabazz, who were so-called Negroes, ex-slaves, a lost people living in the wilderness of North America. According to Farrakhan Muhammad, the tribe of Shabazz was the descendants of kings and queens.
The catechism of the Nation of Islam were the lessons. The lessons, student enrollment, lesson number 1, English lesson number C1. If you can believe that, and if that can become part of your belief system without any doubt in it, you can believe anything that emanates from that.
And it taught you to be respectful, to clean yourself up.
We quit eating pork, we quit drinking, quit whoremongering.
Things begin to change.
Now this was the message. Now this was the mythology of what the message was. Now if you could believe that, then you would also believe that the black man was the first man on this earth, and that the colored man would be the man that grafted from him, which was the white man.
You was wearing silk and robes and stuff. Here is a man telling you, a white-looking man telling you this? Oh, that's gonna fire you up.
And we were proud that we were black, you know, whereas before we were ashamed of it.
He was called the colored man. We wasn't called the colored people. He was called the colored man. Because in that message, the essence of color is black, and the absence of color is white.
He was converted people so fast. We had our temple in Detroit at that time was on Hastings Street on the 2nd floor, over Bendis. The place used to be so crowded that they'd be lined up on the steps for blocks on the streets waiting to try to get in, to listen to the lecture. The teachings of Master Farrakhan Muhammad were, to us at that time, that white people was devils.
And when you know about slavery, now that's enough right then to make you believe that the white people was the devil.
He wanted to separate us from the slave mentality that we had by wishing up white people. That's what he wanted to get us away from. And he felt the only way to get us away from it is to call them devils.
Elijah and Clara became Farrakhan's prize students in this new teaching, and in 1932, he promoted Elijah to Supreme Minister. Circumstances fully unknown, and under pressure from law enforcement officials, Farrakhan Muhammad was ordered to leave the city of Detroit. In that same year, Clara became pregnant with her 7th child. Farrakhan designated this child to be a special one, and as legend would have it, told the expecting parents that this child would one day help his father in a special way. Soon after Farad's departure, the organization he founded fell into turmoil. Some of the people objected to Elijah's rise to leadership. Matters were further exacerbated by the idea that Farad had been elevated to the level of God.
Master Farad Muhammad did not declare himself to be a God. He declared himself to be a prophet. He declared himself to be a prophet. After he left, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad declared that he was a God, or he was the God, or he was God in the person of Master Farad Muhammad.
On October 30th, 1933, in Hamtramck, Michigan, Wallace D. Muhammad was born the 7th child of Elijah and Clara. Elijah, who by now had become Elijah Muhammad, stood as the new leader of the organization that would become known as the Nation of Islam. With the Japanese attack upon Pearl Harbor, thousands of young men rushed the draft board to defend democracy and the free world. Elijah Muhammad refused to register for the draft and was eventually arrested and sentenced to 6 years in prison. Joining Elijah in prison was one of his followers, Karl Omar.
Well, we knew that that we were not regarded as citizens, and we were not going to go in a segregated army, because I was poised for it myself. We were taught that we would have to go to jail if they tried to induct us, and we don't go. They knew good and well that we was right. That's the reason why. They know we was right. Even some of the others said, no, if I was black, I wouldn't go.
In 1946, Elijah Muhammad was released from prison. Foremost in his mind was the development of the Nation of Islam school system.
Number one, who is the original man? The original man is the Asiatic black man, the maker, the owner, the queen of the planet Earth.
Elijah Muhammad is trying to teach all our original people they are in bad shape.
Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Honorable Elijah Muhammad trying to wake them up.
You think he'll do it?
Yes, sir.
He's the only man with a program, right?
Yes, sir.
We felt that, yes, we were getting academic instructions that was equipping us above everybody else. But we also were looking at public schools as being a creation or establishment of the devil.
Much to the surprise of many in Chicago, Elijah insisted that Arabic become a part of the school curriculum. Among those early Arabic students was his son, Wallace D. Muhammad. The job of teaching Arabic would go to Jamil Diab, a Palestinian living in the United States.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad hired him to teach Arabic. That show you where the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's mind was. He hired him to teach Arabic.
And Akbar Muhammad learned Arabic, and W.D. Muhammad learned Arabic. And that was the downfall, so to speak, of them staying with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, because once you understood the Quran and you could read it in Arabic, you had to know that what Elijah Muhammad was teaching and what the Quran says had some distinct differences.
As Elijah Muhammad was released from federal prison, some 700 miles east sat another lost soul in an isolated cell block. While in prison, he was introduced and would eventually master the teachings of the Nation of Islam. Upon his release from prison, Malcolm Little, now known as Malcolm X, took to the streets to spread the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
So my mother insisted that all we need to do is come and hear the speaker one time.
You can see between the black and the white, and you can think for yourself. You know when the man is telling the truth and when the man is telling the lie.
And Minister Malcolm was, he was mesmerizing.
Well, Malcolm was the first black man that I met that wasn't an athlete or a musician who was good at what he did and knew it.
No dropouts in our school. Nobody in our school with an inferiority complex, knees knocking and head itching every time they see a white man.
Every time anything went wrong anywhere in the nation, Mr. Muhammad sent Malcolm.
No, our little children who go to our school are taught to hold their head high.
If it was Newark, New Jersey, he sent Malcolm.
Taught to throw their shoulders back.
If something went wrong in Louisiana, Mr. Muhammad sent Malcolm.
Stop to stick their chest out. Am I right or wrong?
I mean, we really started growing after Malcolm became minister.
He was dynamic, and he had a message.
I mean, he was really directly responsible for a large part of our growth.
The message, the Nation of Islam message in those days was like a light in darkness.
Why you want those kind of lips? You want to look like a monkey.
And the things that he was saying held your attention.
So much so you bleaching up, trying to get like the white man. The man taught you how to hate your hair. He taught you to hate your nose. He taught you to hate your mouth. He taught you to hate your skin. He taught you to hate yourself from your head to your feet. Now the white man is the greatest hate teacher that ever walked the earth.
The senior FOI had strict military drill. Left face, right face, original salute. So as a junior FOI, we would do the same thing, but then add our influence with some fancy movements.
Initially, the FOI was established to be a vanguard of the Nation of Islam.
The purpose of the FOI, everybody got to have a standing army. Every nation needs a standing army.
We were never the aggressor. We weren't bullies. We did never go out, man, and try to intimidate nobody.
The FOI was not aggressive. They were defensive.
We were not to be disrespected. We were not to be intimidated, and we were not to be violated.
They called this the Nation of Islam. That's a nation. So you need a standing army. You don't have to have weapons to have a standing army.
And they would defend fiercely what they build.
They would be willing to go to the point of death.
You know, and in some instances, there were people that crossed the line and they were dealt with. You know, really, they were dealt with. And examples were made, and those examples were respected and remembered.
They would go out and talk to the prostitutes and talk to the pimps and tell them that this is not a neighborhood that you want to be in. So we're out here trying to clean our people up, and you out here trying to dirty them up.
If you ever stepped on an ant hole and before you know it, man, you got ants all over your feet and your socks, or they biting on you because you have violated their space.
We just insisted very strongly that this is not the neighborhood this is where our temple, this is where our temple is. Our women, our children come here. We want them to be able to come in here safely. We want them here to exit safely, and we don't want them to see you.
Well, the FOI had the basic same idea about what we built and what we had to protect it.
All of these other organizations thought about challenging the FOI.
Also, it was a unit designed for discipline and self-control.
It taught you to be respectful, to clean yourself up.
Now, what you need to do is come on inside and learn this truth that we're trying to bring to you so you can clean yourself up and be an FOI and an MGT too. And we converted a lot of pimps and a lot of prostitutes.
To teach us that without discipline, without self-control, we were just a mob of people just in an environment and just taking up space and breathing air that could be given to somebody else.
The name of the group was the MGT GCC, Muslim Girls Training and General Civilization Class. And this was an organization wherein the women were taught how to be women, how to be mothers and wives, how really to serve the community. That was the idea. When I first saw the women who were already at the temple, when I started going, I was amazed. First of all, they were all so beautiful. Beautiful skin, beautiful hair, beautiful clothing. We were responsible for welcoming new converts to the community. And as such, we had to search any female who came to the temple.
Elijah Muhammad, he spoke so highly of women that the women was like flowers in a garden, and you wouldn't allow just anyone to invade your garden.
I think that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has done the greatest and the most beautifulest job to the women in America, the so-called Negroes in America today, for the simple reason we never had nothing, and we still don't have much, but Allah is blessing us with the messenger to give us everything, even men.
Where there are no clean women, there are no clean men.
We have to protect the mother, you know, because she is the mother of civilization. She's the first teacher. So by being the first teacher, we have to protect the woman.
So he said if we wanted to keep our women righteous and wanted to keep our women straight, we had to protect them.
It was their job.
Protect them even if we have to give our life in the process of doing so.
The sister was disrespected in the street. We answered the call.
Where would I be without you, Mother? What would I do without you, strength of the earth? There is no me without you, Mother. Where would I be without your love, your love? There is no me.
Well, the X, the X was very important and very valuable to us.
And the names that are worn by black people in America are like names like Bunch, Powell, Murphy, Johnson. These are European names, and they don't fit us.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said once we are accepted into the Nation of Islam, we should no longer wear the white man's name.
These names were given to us during slavery by the slave master. Today, when we become Muslims and become followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, not only do we give up the Christian religion, but we also give back the slave master's name.
Receiving the X really brought you in as a member, a full-fledged member of the Nation of Islam.
Oh, yeah.
Since we don't know what our own name would be today, we use X. X stands for the unknown.
We would readily shed those particular names by using the X.
You had a Caucasian named slave master's name, and looking at a scope of the world, I don't care how successful you are with that name, people still see you as a product of the slave master.
Mr. Muhammad said our slave names were not our names, they were the names of the people who owned us. And as long as we did not give back that name, we were still owned.
They had a form letter that you would fill out, asking Mr. Farad, or as we call him, Master Farad Muhammad, to restore your name. And you would have to fill this letter out, down to a T. If you had one of the letters in there wrong or it wasn't written right, they would send it back.
That's right.
And tell you your letter did not pass the labor's inspection.
That's right.
So you rewrite this letter. But once that form letter was written perfectly, exactly like it was set out, then you would receive your X from Chicago. They would send you and give you an X according to the temple you were in.
Every organization or every nation has a national economy. And our national economy was the Muhammad Speaks newspaper.
The Muhammad Speaks was like the Nation of Islam. It was a hard-cutting, very demanding, in-your-face paper.
It was the most important organ that we had. It was what we used, man, to stabilize our schools, our businesses. Before anything was built, we had Muhammad Speaks newspaper.
That gave us more impetus now. We have an opportunity to spread our message.
If you have something of this magnitude and of this importance, it had to be monitored, and it had to be taken serious. So each FOI was required to sell Muhammad Speaks. We had a quota. The quota was not mandatory. The quota was only there just to let every believer see what we all should be doing. And the quota was 300.
Although the brothers had to take 300 papers each, and they couldn't bring them back. You sold them or you did whatever you're gonna do with them, but you didn't bring them back.
But this was subliminal, and it was so powerful, because selling 300 papers a week meant that you were in touch with 300 people a week.
And we would get our papers and we would go out and saturate the community, selling papers, bringing the people the message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And those were some of the best times that we had in the Nation of Islam.
You had an opportunity to bring 300 people to the mosque a week. You had an opportunity to sell 3,000 or 4,000 pounds of fish a week to 300 people a week. 300 people meant a whole lot of power in the community.
And it was a magnificent sight for the people to see us in the community with our suits and ties on. You know, that was our uniform, yeah. With our suits and ties on, out there clean, respectable, and dignified in the African American community.
You couldn't sell them papers with some jeans on, or a t-shirt, or just a regular shirt. You had to have a suit and tie on, brother. Your shoes shine. You had to be polished down.
Muhammad Speaks was selling almost 800,000 papers a week.
Here in the West Coast, we were doing close to 360,000 a week. Here in Los Angeles, we were doing 180,000 a week. We were not paper boys, we were nation builders.
Sight of black people, brown people, red people, and yellow people gathered here from all over the world, from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America. You have come simply because you were frightened by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Well, when I first came in, there was a minister named Manuel from Mexico. And he was close to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. There was a brother that we spoke about, Brother Benjamin, up north, who was also very active in the Nation of Islam. In fact, they had a mosque in East LA.
Could these brothers, the Latinos I'm speaking of, enjoyed the same kind of protection?
Right.
And
absolutely.
so if you bother one of the Latinos,
you bother the black man.
You bother the black man, and here come the FOI.
Here come the FOI. 100, 400, 500 strong, whatever it took. Then the women too. Yes, sir.
Latinos, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught, was part of the four races that were not member of the white race. He said there were 5 major races by color, as they call them: black, brown, red, yellow, and white.
So the Latino that comes in, he's just like the black man.
He's just like African American.
So then, therefore, with the Latino that was in your organization, you had a number of Puerto Ricans in New York. You had Mexicans and other Latinos,
Cubans out here.
Mexicans and Cubans out here that were in the nation.
Well, one of them was a minister. 2 of them were ministers. Ministers that could teach the audience of African American and Mexicans and Cubans.
Well, I believe it's that in our own ethnic background, black people generally never oppose coming close to other ethnic groups. And Hispanics also, they're somewhat like that. They take you for what you're worth, you know. Among black people, among Hispanics, we don't so much look at each other as different ethnics, but we realize that we have similar problems, so that's kind of a uniting force between us, I believe.
How did the greater part of the Puerto Rican community here in Spanish Harlem respond to the Nation of Islam and other Puerto Rican Muslims that were walking the streets?
Well, because of the ideological particularities of the Nation of Islam, it was a mixed reception. Puerto Ricans tend to, see how the Nation of Islam, responded to us, and when we hear that our fathers were Asiatic black men, but our white mothers were devils, we didn't take too kindly to that.
In 1958, Elijah Muhammad appointed his son Wallace as minister of Temple No. 12 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Wallace, through his proficiency in Arabic and his understanding of the Qur'an, delivered a message that was vastly different from that of his fathers.
It was kind of a quiet and subtle thing that you begin to notice that there were differences or changes in the way he would maybe view a certain thing.
Well, naturally, his teaching was different when it came to seriousness, because he began to teach a lot of Arabic.
They would talk in terms of W.D. Farad, the Savior said this, and the Imam would be saying, or Uncle Wallace would say, Allah, Allah, and Allah this, Allah that, and he wouldn't, there would be no references to Farad as God.
He didn't teach that the white man was a devil. He began to get away from that type of teaching that his father had taught.
He would go off some time and think, and he would ask Allah. He would say, Allah, if I'm not seeing you the way that I should see you, please help me.
Since 1952, Wallace had been locked in a legal battle with the United States government over his father's insistence that he not register with the draft board. He would eventually be charged with sedition and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison.
What Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam was representing, because they were talking about not only separation, and they were talking against integration.
We don't believe in segregation. We believe in separation.
Separation into some land of their own on in the continental U.S.
Marching on Washington will not solve the problems that are confronted by the black people in this country. That's number one.
Give me your problem. He's talking to the U.S. government. Give me your problem, which is this African-American ex-slave. You don't know what to do with him. Just give them to me. Give me 6 states to put them on, 6 fertile states, and I'll take care of your black man's problem.
A society in which we can stand on our own feet and take care of ourselves as other intelligent people do.
Never to want to marry white people. If the Ku Klux Klan want to keep their race white, I say, help yourself. Go to it. Now, when I say I want to keep mine black, Ku Klux Klan, keep your mouth out of it.
When the Nation of Islam did separate, why do you think public opinion was so strong against you and labeling you a racist organization, a racist group?
Because we wouldn't let any other race into our meeting.
And the reason for that?
Because the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that why should we let them in? He said they've been keeping us out of their meetings for 400 years. He said now when we want to have a meeting among ourselves, all of a sudden they want to come in.
The Nation of Islam was not a terrorist organization. They never charged us with any terrorism. We were never guilty of any terrorism. Like you said, we didn't carry weapons. We didn't proffer killing anybody, lynching anyone, contrary to what was being done to the African American at that time.
A black man in America is in prison. He's born in prison. He's born a convict. He's born an inmate. And when we look upon the president of this country, from the eyes of a people who are as if we were in prison, the president represents nothing but a warden to us, who is over us to tell us what we can do and what we can't do. Whereas to the white people in this country, he's a leader. He's an exponent of freedom, justice, and equality.
Although the Justice Department was closely monitoring the activities of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. It was local law enforcement that took a much different approach, as was the case with Secretary Ronald Stokes in Los Angeles, California.
There was a brother who had a cleaning business where he would pick up and deliver, and he had picked up clothes from different believers' houses, and that night he was bringing clean clothes back to them, and he was getting the clothes out of his car, and the police approached them down on the corner.
I was at the temple, and he heard this disturbance outside of the building. So he said, well, just a minute, let me go out here and see what this is. I'll be right back. And he left.
Secretary Ronald T. had come out of the door. He saw most of the activity was going on, and he raised his hands very high, and he heard him holler, "Stop, stop, stop." And just as he was saying stop, the police officer that was in the car, parked right in front of him, stepped up out of the car and shot him right in the heart.
If you're in the front, you probably could have heard something. I kind of think it was a brick building, but we probably was somewhat towards the back of that building. Oh, okay. So actually, I did not hear anything.
When I got to the scene, I ended up stationed on the corner across the street there, and I observed bodies lying on the sidewalk. I observed a crowd circling the entire perimeter of this mosque across the street. And what happened is that the police had cordoned off the street. They had the police tape up already. Every 5 feet apart, officers with shotguns were stationed and looking at the crowd. So they had 100% control of the situation. I also noticed that after we stood here for about 15 to 20 minutes, I was conscious of the fact that an ambulance had driven up, and the people in the ambulance attendants didn't get out of the ambulance to come up and give or provide any kind of service to the brothers.
The police department did not respect our faith.
As I moved around the crowd, because at that time the word had finally gotten out that Secretary Ronald had gotten killed there, and I did not know where he was. And I moved around, and then that's when someone, I don't remember, someone in the crowd, I don't know if they were Muslim, non-Muslim, they said the one on the steps is dead.
And Malcolm X came to town.
Yes, he did.
Did you speak with him?
Absolutely, because I knew him. I knew him even, before I moved to Los Angeles. I had known him for a couple of years before I moved to Los Angeles. Yes, he did come. He was very competent and very helpful.
He was very upset.
Oh, yeah.
They beat him. While he was laying on the ground with a bullet through his heart, they put a hole in his head with their clubs. They'd arrived early. As I told you earlier, even the policeman said, "Why should the ambulance hurry? There's nothing but niggers out there." Why, if some of you could hear or were aware of the conversation that the police engaged in concerning this event, I don't care how much anti-Muslim you might be, your own humane quality would make you resent with shame and their disgraceful behavior.
I remember this policeman, Donald Weiss, said he saw this male, black male, or probably Negro male and nigger male, whatever, coming towards him with his hands outstretched, and he thought he was going to choke him.
The police officer testified that our secretary was coming to choke him, and he was saying some words in foreign language, which we knew was Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Right. But that was his testimony in court, and out of fear for the safety of his life, he shot the brother.
And I went to one day of court session, and after that, I didn't go back. Because, I knew that what they were saying, were lies, and I really didn't want to have an outburst in court because I certainly would have, So I never went back after that. I only went one day, and I didn't go back.
Did the police ever speak with you and give you any information as to what happened?
Absolutely not.
What sticks out most in your mind from that incident?
It's Allah, really. And now that I really know Allah, that how He really blessed me with strength that I never knew I had.
There was something that took place prior to Ronald Stokes' murder in Los Angeles in 1962. And that was that Mr. Muhammad made a statement in Washington, D.C., laying down what should happen to someone who murders.
That's right. He said, he who murders a Muslim must be murdered. He must be murdered. He said, this is the fruit of Islam. This is the FOI. And the brothers in number 7 were ready to lay down, brother. They were ready to throw down.
So now we have Ronald Stokes, and he's dead, he's gone. And we have Malcolm feeling some
sent out there to California, and all of these people that he made fun of and made small of as nonviolent and turning the other cheek, which we were taught not to do and whatnot, we ended up doing the same thing. So how you think that made Brother Malcolm feel?
And Malcolm had given several speeches right there in the center of Harlem about how tough and the FOI was in the Nation of Islam.
Yeah.
So now he had to come back to Harlem and sort of explain what had taken place.
That's right. Try to explain.
How did that go over with the people of Harlem?
I know it went over with me.
In January of 1963, Wallace Muhammad was released from federal prison. While in prison, he had been informed of the moral degradation of some of the ministers within the Nation of Islam.
Every month there would be the meetings of the ministers from around the country. And he said when he saw them, they were dressed in furs, long furs, and they were dripping in jewels and in Borsalino kind of hats. And he said to his father, he told me that he said to his father that, Dad, we lost the religion.
It wasn't too long after he was released from prison, and we were in a conversation about the nation and some of the problems in the nation and how some of the people were becoming a little veering off from what the moral track that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had the community on.
Wallace openly refused to accept the idea that Farrakhan Muhammad was God. Due to his rebellion, Elijah Muhammad suspended his son from the Nation of Islam, thus preventing him from having any contact with members of the Nation of Islam.
And he said to me, if Farrakhan, he said, Hassan, if Farrakhan was standing here right now in front of me, he said, I would grab him in his collar and snatch him out of his shoes.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad loved his son and he wanted him to be with him, but he could not take and afford to have a challenge to his position. And when he openly attacked him, along with his nephew, Hassan Shareef, I mean, that's history, and went against him and failed, you know, and he was out there.
When President Kennedy got shot, all of us was in New York at the time to a bazaar. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was supposed to come, but this was before Kennedy got shot. He was supposed to come to the Manhattan Arena to speak. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad called Malcolm and told him to cancel that meeting. He wasn't going to come because Kennedy had been shot, the people was emotional, and it's not the time to talk now. And he told Malcolm to cancel it, don't let nobody say anything.
Instructions were that no one was to mention John F. Kennedy by name.
Malcolm told him that he couldn't cancel it. He told him that he had spent too much money to cancel it. So he was going to go on with it. That's a big mistake.
When Kennedy was assassinated, they had told us not to say anything against it.
Malcolm went on with the meeting, and he added insult to injury by saying that chickens come home to roost and all that kind of stuff. But he was in hot water before that.
He said, I was a farm boy, so chickens coming home to roost never made me sad. Chickens coming home to roost always made me glad.
So what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did was he told him that for his insubordination, he could not speak in public for 90 days.
He was silenced, but he thought he was only silenced from speaking publicly. He thought he could officiate in Mosque number 7. But I was on the rostrum when he came. They would have me open up sometimes. And I was opening up when he was coming in the door, and Joseph barred him from the door. So I said, uh-oh, the shit hits the fan.
Now this is what people don't talk about this, that he could not speak in public for 90 days. He was still the minister of Temple number 7, but he could not speak for 90 days. Malcolm rejected that. Malcolm said, I can't stay quiet for 90 days.
So he was not allowed in the mosque. He couldn't go in the restaurant. He was put in what we call Class C.
Had he accepted the 90-day suspension, do you believe that your father would have reinstated him as his national representative?
Definitely. The community loved Malcolm, but they loved the Honorable Elijah Muhammad 1,000 times more.
So he said the best thing for him to do is just to leave. And he left. And he thought that a lot of people were going to follow him. But they didn't.
Everybody thought it was going to fall apart when Malcolm left. Well, Allah God, for his whatever reason, he decided it was going to be so. He was just going to be Elijah Muhammad that time, and that was it. You might as well forget it.
Because they wasn't following him in the first place by himself. They followed him because he was following the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Malcolm's suspension from the Nation of Islam brought to surface what was only known by a small segment of the membership, and that was that Elijah Muhammad had fathered children with several of his private secretaries. So Malcolm finds out about these young ladies who have children by Mr. Muhammad. What is his reaction, and how is he feeling about the Nation of Islam and Mr. Muhammad?
He didn't say nothing about it until after Brother Ronald got killed. And then he had to have some justification for the break.
Whether it was the secretaries coming up pregnant, or it was a situation.
Wasn't that.
It was, you're saying it was Ronald Stokes?
It was Ronald Stokes, he told me. He went to Mr. Muhammad and said, dear Holy Apostle, these brothers got wounded. Some of them will be in wheelchairs for the rest of their lives. He said, can we put another line on the charity slip and make a collection for them, for their support? And Mr. Muhammad said, we didn't kill them, we didn't wound them, the devils wound them. Let the devils take care of them. And that was,
wow.
Malcolm told me this out of his mouth.
Although Malcolm was upset behind the untimely death of Ronald Stokes, he offered a different account as to why he left the Nation of Islam.
But the real reason is that Elijah Muhammad, the head of the movement, is the father of 8 children by 6 different teenage girls, 6 different teenage girls who were his private personal secretaries.
At 2 a.m. on February 14th, 1965, Malcolm X and his family were suddenly awakened when firebombs were thrown through the windows of their home. Malcolm, his wife Betty, and their children narrowly escaped with their lives. 7 days later, on February 21st, 1965, at the Autobahn Ballroom, Malcolm would meet his fate.
I was downstairs when he came in, and he was very upset. Went out on the stage, Benjamin opened up, and the code word was make it plain. Whenever the minister was ready to come up to the dais, he would say, make it plain. And then the person opening up would cut short and introduce the minister. And he did. And he went out to the I could hear all this, but I couldn't see it. So somebody said, nigga, get your hands out my effing pocket. And Malcolm said, cool it, brothers, cool it, brother. And he stepped from behind the podium towards stage right. And the guys came down and shot him.
Salam alaikum. Hold it.
call it.
You heard the gunshots.
Of course.
And
Benjamin hit the deck.
What did you do?
Picked up a briefcase, went outside, and saw the life go out of his body.
Soon after Malcolm's death, many began to speculate as to whether Elijah Muhammad had played a role in Malcolm's assassination.
But our daddy would have never had no Muslim killed. Never.
When Malcolm is assassinated, Malcolm X was assassinated on February 21st, 1965.
Right.
What was your grandfather's reaction?
Well, at the time, I was excommunicated, and the imam was excommunicated. We were both out of the community. But my father later told me that when they got the news, he said, your grandfather broke down and he cried like a baby. And I know a lot of people might say, they're just saying that, they can say anything. My father was a truthful man. If my father didn't want to tell you the truth, he wouldn't tell you nothing.
If I ask you just point blank, there are people that believe that Malcolm X's assassination, the bombing of his home, and the threats that he received could not have happened without the approval of your grandfather, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Absolutely false.
Daddy would have never approved of nobody killing anybody. Daddy would never approve that.
Have you gotten over the assassination?
No. I broke down in tears 40 years later, 3 times, even on the subway, no. And if I think too much on it, I break down and cry now. Because up until Malcolm, I never thought we would see our day in the sun. And then Malcolm, I said, this is it. This is it. We go throw down. They either will kill us or we go become citizens of this country.
Blood in my veins makes me the same. Wanna be a man, but I know I'm less than.
Shortly after the death of Malcolm X, Louis Farrakhan replaced Malcolm as the minister of Temple No. 7 in Harlem, New York, and subsequently became the new national representative for the Nation of Islam.
And I'm smiling out loud, but my smile is a lie. Tell me why.
With the assassination of prominent figures, combined with civil unrest and an ongoing war in Vietnam, America found itself at a crossroads of social change. And it was in this arena that then heavyweight boxing champion Muhammad Ali would face his toughest opponent.
Therefore, this brother that they used to call Clay, Cassius Clay, I give him the name Muhammad Ali, is universally recognized, and I am also given credit for calling him by such name.
I think Muhammad Ali had that same love for Elijah Muhammad, but he had a certain love and respect for himself and the understanding of where he came from. He was Cassius Clay. Elijah Muhammad made him Muhammad Ali.
We believe in obeying the laws of the land. We are taught to obey the laws of the land as long as it don't conflict with our religious beliefs.
Here was a man who had been given the opportunity in this country for great wealth. And He wants to depart from the status quo.
Whatever the punishment, whatever the persecution is for standing up for my religious beliefs, even if it means facing machine gun fire that day, I will face it before denouncing Elijah Muhammad and the religion of Islam. I'm ready to die.
That was his decision. That was his consciousness. That wasn't a blind loyalty. Muhammad Ali would have stood machine gun fire. He would have done that. That's right. And I know it. And the country and those people that he's told that believe that he would do it. He wasn't doing that in ignorance.
They describe Malcolm as being our manhood. Well, in some respects, Muhammad Ali was that too, but not in the eloquent sense, but just in that world of celebrity.
As the 1960s came to a close, Elijah Muhammad turned to his next economic venture, Whiting H&G Fish.
As long as your stomach is in the kitchen of another people, you'll always be their slave.
During the 1972 run in that area, Elijah Muhammad was really making an all-out push to grow the Nation of Islam, to expand it. And we're getting to an area now that is international trade.
If you're going to build a nation, you need an infrastructure. And your infrastructure must include business.
Well, it just happened that in New York, a gentleman by the name of Mizan Studios, he was a Turkish Muslim. He met the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He hired Mr. Dobra on the spot just to train the members of the Nation of Islam in the area of international trade.
This was the first time in the history of black people in America of African descent being given an opportunity to take the leadership in such a dynamic, independent role of economics.
At the behest of Elijah Muhammad, Nadar Ali negotiated a deal with the Peruvian government to import large quantities of fish to be sold by members of the Nation of Islam. This was aimed at furthering Elijah Muhammad's objectives of gaining economic independence.
How much pressure was on each rank and file member to sell that fish?
Well, a lot of pressure, but it wasn't physical pressure. It was mental pressure.
Usually a quota would be initiated, and the captain, who had control of the men, would implement a quota on you rather than you coming in telling them what you were willing to do.
From the sale of Whiting H&G, the Nation of Islam grossed over $18 million a year. But such a massive business venture did not come without challenges.
We unloaded 7 ships in the LA harbor. We unloaded 7 ships ourselves in the LA harbor. We came out on the docks to help. They said we were not union. And that was a union dock. So what the union people did, since we came out there, they said, well, we'll close down the docks. We won't do nothing.
And we weren't going to allow nothing or nobody to stop us. So they said that they wouldn't unload it, period. We had 20 trucks, we had our own men, we had 240 men, and the captain said, look, we'll take care of it ourselves.
And he called them all to attention. And he told them what had to be done.
And they say, well, look, you can't do that. This is a union dock. If we don't unload it, it won't be unloaded.
Those brothers pulled off their coats after the longshoremen left and sat down. Their brothers pulled off their coats. They went inside the warehouse.
And a couple of the brothers knew how to operate cranes. Brother jumped on the crane. In fact, it was a Lieutenant Rayford. I know, a little bitty brother, man. He was small in size, but his heart was big as the ocean, man. He was a fiery young soldier.
And they started running that little tow motor.
He operated and swung that big lift around, and brother began to stack it on. Just stack the fish on top of that bed.
And started sending the fish down on the conveyor belt. We had our own trucks come in.
Over 200,000 pounds on that first shipment, if I'm not mistaken. We unloaded it off the dock and started putting it on the truck. Shop stewardess came out and told us, now listen, the union is going to send some people over here to let you know that, you're not supposed to be doing this. So the captain said, man, don't worry about none of that, man. You do what you got to do. We're going to do what we got to do. We're not going to let our fish rot just because we are not in the union. The guy said, who's in charge? As soon as he said that, man, We stopped and the captain stepped straight to the point, man. Captain Ali Rashid was so cool. I remember he had on a black outfit, and the captain said, "I'm in charge, man." And the guy told the captain, said, "Well, look, you know, you're in violation here. You can't do this." And the captain said, "In violation of who and of what? Who am I violating?" "Well, this is a union dock, and the union has to do this. You can't do it." The captain said, "Look, man, look at me." Captain said, "These are our fish. These are our men. Allah's God, so what you want to do?" 200 men, everybody was ready to do whatever we was going to tear that dock up. And the man said, "Look, I ain't got nothing to do with this fish. I sure ain't got nothing to do with God, with Allah, so y'all handle your business." The captain said, "You a smart boy. Here, take a piece of fish." Gave him a 5-pound box of fish, and we finished the work. And, that was it.
During the 1974 Savior's Day Convention, marking the birth of Farrakhan Muhammad, the Nation of Islam's National Secretary, Abbas Rasul, opened the convention by outlining the nation's profound accomplishments.
Salam Restaurant, the Muslim import stores, the Muslim fish house, the Shabazz grocery store, the Shabazz bakery and coffee shop, Temple No. 2 clothing store and office building, the new sales and office building on 78th Street, the Guarantee Bank and Trust Company, Progressive Land Developers, Muhammad Speaks newspaper plant, which is a cold storage and warehouse. So in closing, I would like to say just this, that the followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad have distributed in the hells of North America during this past year over 34 million Muhammad Speaks newspapers.
Moments later, Elijah Muhammad, in failing health, addressed his faithful followers in what was to be his last Savior's Day appearance.
"I said to you, my beloved brothers and sisters,
yes, sir,
give justice to where it belongs.
Yes, sir.
And don't try and rob people out of justice.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
If the white man in he has freed you and me to go to work for self, and you go all around the earth, feed on object, go wherever you want to, then he's not to blame today. You are the one to be blamed.
Yes, sir.
We all love to be equal with other people who are equal. Well, then do something to make them to accept us as their equal.
Yes, sir.
We can't sit off over here on the curbstone and tell him to come sit down with us.
Right.
No. We are lazy people. We want something for nothing.
Yes, sir.
That's what way we are. We are lazy. We cannot take a country like this and build up cities from one end of it to the other, like the white man have done. Well, we helped him. Well, that was your fault. Certainly he was going to use you.
Yes, sir.
If you did not use yourself.
Yes, sir.
I love you.
Yes, sir. We love you.
But I love you to do something for self.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And stop putting your faults on the slave master.
Yes, sir. And I've said to you in the name of Allah, Assalamu alaikum.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn.
As President Nixon primed the American public for his departure from office, a similar transitioning of power was set to take place within the Nation of Islam. In the winter of 1974, Elijah Muhammad longed to have the one son who objected to his teachings return to his fold.
The same day Daddy passed. Daddy passed about 6 o'clock in the morning. So Wallace had already accepted, they had already told everybody he could be the next leader. I mean, not everybody, but the people that they could get to, the ministers.
I was privileged to travel with Imam W.D. Muhammad as he went around the country speaking to the ministers and virtually teaching and informing them that he was going to become the leader of this community and what they were to expect.
He was different than anybody else, and he was on point from anybody else, and you could see that he was not in the mold that everybody else was in. He was not in the history mode of black and white as anybody else. He was in the mode of the Qur'an.
Surely I've turned myself to you, O Allah, who originated the heavens and the earth. I am not of those who associate gods with God.
Daddy told us, the ministers, he said, I can lead you up to the door, but somebody else could have to show you through it. And I knew exactly what he meant there. He meant that one day Wallace would be our leader.
We are not a people to harp upon colors and racism. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad say this is not a race. He says this is a nation.
It was announced that Wallace Muhammad was going to be the leader. And when he came to the podium and spoke, and his words are what really, his words touched my soul.
The Indian can come and find his likeness among you. Yes? Even the European Gentile can come here and find a likeness among you.
And here's the younger man who has really takes up where the father leaves off and is going into another direction. And you could sense it.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad will fill our hearts. Love for him will never depart from us. Respect for him will never depart from us. Though his 130-some pound physical body does not sit in the chair of his office, we still respect that chair because we know his works, his teaching, his thoughts, his feelings, his aspirations, his ambitions were not that came into being with the flesh that Georgia produced, but is that came into being with time itself. This is a nucleus. This is a beginning. This is a small community. But the nation of Islam is the whole earth.
And with the words that he was saying, you know, the winds of adversity are going to come against us.
And when the strong gush of wind coming from the forces of emotion come against this house and blow, the windows stay intact.
But it'll just be like the wind hitting the curtain, and it's not going to even waver. It's not going to move.
The shade doesn't even waver.
There's not one wind that can blow against this that's going to even ruffle the shades.
The curtains at the window, though the window be up, won't even be moved by the winds of emotion. Simply because this house is built on strength, divine strength. This is a house formed by knowledge.
Those words were, contained life and future direction and hope for the future and a determination that as a community we were going to survive, and not just survive, but we were going to thrive.
And men of knowledge just don't fall down in the floor and weep and moan and cry like babies when the wind of emotions come. Let your winds of emotions come against this house. It stands forever. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.
For 43 straight years, Elijah Muhammad had presided over an organization that influenced the lives of men, women, and children, surviving scandal, betrayal, and the assassination of a prominent figure. This chapter in American history was coming to a close, and Wallace Muhammad would take his place as leader, and the changes he would make would be felt throughout the world. Wallace Muhammad disbanded the Nation of Islam and changed its name to the World Community of Islam in the West. With this transition, he would be forever referred to as Imam, a title identifying him as a Muslim leader throughout the world.
We have now clearly declared ourselves to be not only Muslims, but followers of the Quran and followers of Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah, you know, almost from the beginning, the Imam began establishing the universal teachings of the religion, almost from the beginning.
Muslims believe in the oneness of God, the oneness of society. And we don't believe that society can function well unless it's in agreement with itself.
I mean, if you can go back to the early time of his teachings to us as a community, as he was erasing the blackboard, he was also writing on that blackboard the mind of the community, the universal ideas of our religion.
He said, he know we're tied into blackness. He wants to take us out of that into Islam proper under the Prophet Muhammad of 1400 years ago, not his father.
Taking out of us the nationalistic thinking and making it more universal.
I can only say it personally, I mean, that it can only be a work of God, because it's just such a total transformation.
The most profound change that was made was the change in the belief that God is black or manifest in black flesh, and that the devil is white or manifest in Caucasian flesh. This was, I believe, the most disturbing change, if I could put it that way, the most disturbing change that have taken place.
Wallace came in with a completely different agenda and program. And it was like, whoa, what is this?
He was very progressive in his changes and progressive in his teachings and preachings and removing the old ideas with explanation.
The attitude in the past, as you know, was one of suspicion and fear. Suspecting that the Caucasian would abuse the trust if they were trusted, and a fear that the community wouldn't be able to grow with Caucasian presence.
Imam Muhammad came at a time when we in the Nation of Islam were becoming rapidly dissatisfied with the rampant materialism, the exploitation of members by the leadership, deceptive practices by the leadership.
If you can survive a public reprimand, I think you should sit in the back of the room. Because the imam didn't wait to take you into the back office to tell you what he thought about your shortcomings. He would tell you publicly what he thought about your shortcomings.
Many rank-and-file members of the Nation of Islam believed that there were ministers who had utilized the Nation of Islam for their own personal gain, and the new leader was not reluctant in expressing his displeasure.
They don't frighten me. Right up here, you got sissies. Right up here, there are sissies. I don't have to identify them. You know some of the sissies that sit up here. In every mosque leadership, you got some sissies. Now, who are you going to follow, me or the sissies?
When the imam came into office, everything had to be made over again. He had to bring these people now out of the teachings of Elijah Muhammad that they had been in since the 30s.
Imam Muhammad made a tactical withdrawal that was so powerful, because you got to realize that the FBI had their scopes on the Nation of Islam and had listed us as a terrorist organization.
And when he came in, he started changing temples to mosques, which meant taking out chairs and having prayer rooms. He started having to fast the Ramadan in the appropriate months.
But in time, he deconstructed and dismantled many of the structures or the infrastructure that was in place during the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
But Imam Muhammad, being as wise as he was, made a tactical move and took us out of the uniform, reassigned us, and put us back in the street looking like everybody else. So they didn't know who they hit.
Because I worked with him in the early days in placing, moving cities. And I always wondered why, when you come into something and it's basically stable, why do you start shifting people around? And because when the people who are now unsure of the direction and they got a familiar face in front of them, the best thing, if I was organizing something, keep the familiar face in front of them, and your changes that you're trying to implement through that familiar face in front of them, use them to implement the change. But when you start shifting people, you erode credibility, you got new faces, people don't know them, they themselves are unsure.
There were those who were in disagreement with the changes that Wallace Muhammad had made. Among those who were in opposition to his new direction was Minister Louis Farrakhan.
I was sitting in a mosque in St. Louis. I was sitting there on the floor. This is November of 1977. And Imam Muhammad had evidently heard the rumblings. So Imam Wallace Muhammad said, I heard that there's some people trying to reestablish or rebuild the teachings of my father. I put a nail in that coffin, and you'll never be resurrected. In June of that year, I had resigned from Imam Muhammad and relocated to St. Louis. And by the middle of '78, Minister Farrakhan held a couple of meetings here in Chicago, and he began to recruit people who wanted to help him to rebuild the Nation of Islam.
I tried to talk him out of it.
When he broke away from the Imam Muhammad's community and reestablished the Nation of Islam, we say the smaller segment went with that break.
Because he felt that he came to give himself to help Imam Muhammad, but Imam Muhammad and those around him had this apprehension about Brother Farrakhan and didn't trust the help that he came to the table to offer him.
When Louis Farrakhan left the world community of Islam, which had been changed from the Nation of Islam in 1977, and restarted, started a new Nation of Islam that has no connection and is not a continuation of the Nation of Islam headed by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
That went with him were those, what we call those diehard Nation of Islam followers who didn't want to change. So really, it might have been a help to us. They moved over there, fine. That clears the way for us to move faster with what we have to do.
Most of us in 1975 most of us became students of Imam W.D. Muhammad. Minister Farrakhan never became a student.
Shortly before I returned to Chicago as the Archbishop 11 years ago, I had heard of his name because of his work in Interfaith Dialogue.
Prophet Muhammad says many things about who's the best. Says the best of you, one who loves for his brother what he loves for himself. That means the best of you is the one who's true in his saying that he loves his brother, because he's not just talking.
We've discovered over these last 12 years of meeting together and sharing our faith.
He was so imbued with the revelation to the Prophet Muhammad that it was his own life that was closely involved in what he was telling you from the Quran, and he spoke in Quranic terms almost all the time, even in personal conversation.
As Muslims, we are told that every human being is Muslim. The word means wanting peace and wanting to be at peace.
Living these together brought us to feel more and more that we are brothers and sisters in the human family, as Imam Muhammad always taught. That we have to build on what we have in common, and this is how we'll help to bring peace in the world.
He automatically then is in a condition to work for peace with his fellow man.
When we would meet, that's what we always felt, that we were one family. That yes, two different faiths, but the love that we had for God, and this love that had to be translated into love for each other, was really the base of our relationship.
So if we can, as the two major religions in the world, Islam and Christianity, find our way together, then the world will be at peace.
Every time I met with him, up to the last time, just a week before he passed away, I left with a great peace. It was, I realized afterward that it's not by chance that every time he would greet us, we was with Assalamu alaikum, which is peace be unto you. And that's exactly what I felt every time I would be with him.
In 1974, in December, right before the Honorable Elijah Muhammad passed, Imam Muhammad began to tour the country and represent his father. He came here to Los Angeles, and I assembled 1,200 men downstairs on this property, on this site, in the mosque. And we had our regional FOI meeting. And in that meeting, Imam Muhammad said that he, Master Farad Muhammad, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad were like a 3-stage rocket. He said the first stage of that rocket is designed to get you off the ground. Master Farad Muhammad appeared July 4th, 1930, and began to teach what is now called Islam, or the teaching of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The second stage of that rocket is designed to put you in orbit. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad stood us up, cleaned us up, gave us a thirst for education, pointed us toward the Kaaba, and taught us the importance of doing for self. But the last stage of that rocket is the most important part, because the last stage takes you all the way to your destination. Imam Muhammad came with the Quran and the Sunnah, and there's nothing else left but for us to go straight ahead.
The Nation of Islam grew out of the bowels of Detroit's inner city to address the feelings of inferiority and self-hatred experienced by those who were labeled as American Negroes. The nation had survived the internal struggles and challenges of betrayal and greed, and under the leadership of Imam W.D. Muhammad, the movement had transcended the confines of its once held separatist position. And now at the Vatican, the world stage of religious unity, Imam W.D. Muhammad was the culmination of 6 decades of struggle and exemplified the miraculous road that the Nation of Islam had traveled.
We cannot but look for opportunities for religions to meet and by sincere discussion come to a better knowledge of each other.
We thank Allah for this occasion, for leaders from the great religions to meet here in this holy city of the Catholics, hosted by His Holiness John Paul II, their leader, who has our delegation among his Muslim well-wishers and fervent admirers. I have devoted my life to building bridges. Inclusion was in my heart. I believe I wanted that, and I think my father conditioned me to want that. That is, not to be separated, but to be with all good people. I wholeheartedly accept and embrace with you the idea of unity, mutual sharing, and love for one another. We have to condition ourselves to be at peace. God has given us the requirements that we have to meet for a life of faith in Him. And when we meet these conditions, we do have peace. There are many convincing signs everywhere. Those with open eyes, belief, and faith will see them and hear them, will hear the sounds everywhere that goodness is on the rise. We're living in a time of revival of the true life that God put into the human souls when He created the first person. A new world of faith community all over the world is on the rise. God is one, His creation is one whole. There is one universal law for all matter, for all material things, and everything is related. God has made things different, human beings too, because God wants unity to progress. The diversity is to provide the unity with legs, with wheels, with movement for more progress. God said He had made us humanly different by color, by nationality, to encourage us to walk together and get acquainted with each other, to have peace and unity. We thank His Holiness John Paul II for making this opportunity possible. As the Imam and representative for a large number of Muslim Americans, we greet this multi-religious gathering with peace, Salaam alaikum, with peace and with brotherly love. We ask that divine favor be upon all the participants and on this holy place. Ameen. Peace.
I am so glad for what I can see. Every man in every land living in peace and harmony. I am so glad for this that is true. If you can extend a hand to help me, then I can sure do the same for you. I'm so glad